There's a workbench now I made in about 1983, I'm going to say. And I had 1989 written on it, just for the crack along there. Seems to be painted over now. Someone probably rubbing off a brush on it or something. I wrote 1989 on it, and it seemed like a million years into the future. And the old the business of making sure, you see, when you're working on the bench, I remember at that school, you'd be taking out a joint, you always work over the leg. But of course, the bench has to be sitting on the leg directly to the floor. There's no point in having that nailed on like that. Then it's bouncing on nails as you're doing your work. So you always have to, apparently in a proper situation, solid all the way down to the floor. And while we're in this corner, that is Bilbo School 1909 floorboards, which was done up in about 1977, 78. Johnny Roddy gave Pat Hynan, who'd done it up, he gave him a loan of a prong of a pike lifter to help bust up them floors, right? And I think that door could be from Bilbo School, because I vaguely remember that green paint in the doors in Bilbo School. That's the only thing that's making me say it's from Bilbo School. And that would be pretty good. Now, of course, if I had a measuring tape and sees it 3 foot wide, one, two. By gosh, I'll tell you one thing. It's closer to 3 foot wide than it is 2 foot 8 or 2 foot 10, which would mean I would put money on it that that's the internal door of Bilbo School. From 1909, imagine. Now what I'd love, sometime I'll ask Mike, maybe if he didn't mind sacrificing that partition, you could make something out of it, a little bench or something, or a forum. Now, while we're in the history of this corner, well, they're tables I made for the force in June. I made, there's an old bracket system on them there, they can open up, you see. I made 30 of them. 120 legs I had to cut them joints out of. 3, 4, 12, yeah, 120. Anyway, I wired that. I think I wired that. I think I did. No, maybe I didn't. No, I didn't. Anyway, it's all the one. They were the two presses for all the world now that I used to use as a rosary beads, because you get 10 handles. No, that was never inside. I think maybe it was 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, 6 for the drawers, and then there was no drawers in another one, so you had 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 drawer handles to look at. That was my rosary beads when I was counting the decades. And that, what you call, Singer sewing machine, was pulled out of the ditch up there, off up the back of the haggard, and it would have been Johnny Roddy's mother. She was a seamstress. She could make clothes and that, you know, and stuff. And when Johnny built all these sheds when he came in here, and he put chicken wire to stop the felt from sagging in between the joists, which are only 6x2, and my God, they're long enough. 8 and 8, 16. They must be 16 or 18 foot long. And Johnny would have made that door out of old boards. And even look at the timber, there's only offcuts from Maher's sawmill in Glasha, at Glasha Creamery down below Bilbo School, below the bridge. There used to be a sawmill there, and you'd get Johnny would get a heap of this for very cheap, and he done so much fencing and made even proper use of it, not just firewood. In fact, no firewood. This hay barn then was a huge thing to get done. I remember with a reek of hay in the middle there. Well, obviously there was no concrete there, this was just a haggard. There was a reek of hay there, and they used the hay as scaffolding. I remember up there, on top of the hay with the workers, I was about 12 or 13, I suppose, 12 maybe, 11, and he was cutting those timbers to go across there with a bushman saw. He didn't have electric saw. And I had one end of the saw and he had the other. And I remember him telling me, don't push, only pull, he says. And then what they done was when they were building that corner, the hay barn corner there, they cut that shape out with a piece of metal, a flat piece of metal which they'd sharpened, and they beat it like a hatchet for all the world. They beat it with a hammer to make a cutting device to cut they made all that down there on the ground, and then I don't remember them pulling it up, but I believe that's the way they do it. And then years later, the lane 2 was put onto it. Years later, these houses were built. Not years later. In fact, no, they were there first. Then came the hay barn. Then Johnny joined the middle with see-through sheets and the whole lot. The door that used to be there before that aluminium door was, I wonder was it in there somewhere, came from Dwyer's pub in Cappamore. The milking machine. This was the old cow house, which was made bigger, and it became the new. But this was the new cow house. It was never there. There was nothing here. That was built with that shed and the one at the other side of Bilbo School wall. And in around the 1930s, they re-roofed the main house below, and that was the galvanised they put on it, because in the 1980s, Pat Heinen took off that galvanised and put on slates, and Johnny and myself then we made this thing, so we did. This lane 2 is falling down now. With forestry poles is all we had. That was my light. I had that light hanging down there with a switch on the end of it, pull switch. So when I drive my car in here, I could put my hand out the window and turn on my light and shut my doors then, what's left of them. Now, there's a pillar missing. There should be 6 pillars. This pillar was cut out. So look at it there. It's cut out from under it, and there was a big iron put from one roll to another. And the idea of that was so it was easy to back in the hay. In the summer, that's not a door, but it used to be all taken down for the summer, so as the tractor could come up the yard, out into the field, and reverse in that section. And that pillar had to be gone out of the way, so as you could get your hay far in, you know. It's fit to fall. To be honest, it should be nearly pulled down, just in case it falls on top of somewhere. The only reason it's held together now is the nails from each sheet is stuck on that. So that's the crack there now. I made that too at school. A step ladder. I only ever had a step ladder. I never knew my real ladder. We even made this. bracket system for hooking on. When you open it, it hooks onto that little screw there, flathead screw into the bargain. All those are flathead screws because that's how old it is. I remember very hard to work it out. We found it very hard out because everything was wide in the bottom and it got narrow. It was a big ordeal for us at 13 or 14, 15 maybe years of age. When we came in here in 1975 from Bilbo Cross, there was a wall, I'm going to say straight up there where that line is. That field came right in as far as there. There was an old Anglia park there. There's a photograph there somewhere of Mikey Shanahan Volkswagen here. There's another one, Mikey Shanahan's. There was no wing walls like that. There was no gate. And that was wider going down as well. You could park a car. There was no fence there, down where the van is now. And that was just a shed with a flat roof on it. But then eventually Johnny made a bedroom out of it. And a bathroom, a toilet. There was no toilet here. That house wasn't as wide as that. Didn't go out that wide at all. Probably 2/3 of the width of it that it is there now. Maybe even half it. And there was no porch like that in it. There was a little sticking out flat roof porch. And when we came, there was nothing there. There was a wall, a little wall along there, with a gate in the middle, around there. Up into the haggart, as they call it, where the hay would be. No sheds. The only shed was, you had to go around this corner. And it was the very end of this shed over here. Yeah, you can see the joint actually. That was the only shed here. It was called the old cow house. Now it's the new, that was the new cow house. But then this got done up, so this became the new cow house. And it was from here, that crack there. And there was, you can see the width of it, like it's ridiculous. Look, I mean the width of it must be 2 foot wide. You know, kind of mud and stones and stuff. And the dung would be piled up against that wall, the gable end of the house, which was only probably that width when we came. And I remember Johnny and myself, or Johnny I suppose mostly, he fucked the dung away from the wall, and that wouldn't be dampening this room. This room was very damp, so that was sorted out. And we all lived there for about I don't know, just I'd say within 3 years he had Pat Hyman in to do a big job in it. So he did. And there was shed after shed after shed. And that little one there with the ivy on it was the pump house. Because there's a well dug down into the field there somewhere. God knows where it is now. There's no need for it now because the water is coming down the road. There was never any apple trees here, but there was a garden out in that field over at the very corner. There was a garden there. And anything we ever got when we were building, we had to leave it over at the well, over at Ryan's well corner, and bring it over in a wheelbarrow. Concrete blocks, sand, barrels of water from the well, everything.